My brother, after 5 years of being a child, comes to our family and manipulates it, and then dares to threaten me, but I am not the weakling that he remembers me, and I went to extreme measures to deal with him. I'm 27. I live in a small town, work in a bookstore, an ordinary life, an ordinary job, nothing special. But that's just on the surface. Inside me, passions boil, memories rage. Memories I try to forget, but they won't let go. They're always there, ready to burst out at the most unexpected moment, like now. It all started with a phone call. Mom, her voice sounded strange, tired, resigned. She said that Dad's will was finalized. Everything would be divided between me and him, Alex, my brother. Just the mention of Alex makes me shudder. 5 years, it's been 5 years since I last saw him, since I last spoke to him, 5 years since. Everything happened, and now suddenly he's back in my life, or at least his ghost, his shadow looms over me like an ominous omen. Mom said he called, that he wanted to reconnect. I almost laughed. Reconnect? After everything he did? After what he took from me? I told Mom I wasn't ready, that I needed more time. She sighed, a heavy, weary sigh, and it made me feel instantly guilty. She said she understood, but I could hear the disappointment in her voice, the unspoken plea. She wants us to be a family again, to go back to how things were. Before Alex, before the lies, the betrayal, the mess. I just can't. Every time I think about him, I see her face, Ashley's face. The way she looked at me that night, the mix of hurt and pity. God, I hate that look. It's burned into my memory, and it's all his fault, Alex's fault. He was always the favorite, charming, charismatic, the one who could do no wrong in Mom and Dad's eyes. I was the quiet one, the loner, the bookworm, the one who always played by the rules. Alex was the rebel, the risk-taker, the one who always pushed the boundaries, and somehow he always got away with it. He was like Teflon, nothing ever stuck to him. I remember one time when we were kids, maybe 10 or 11, Alex stole my favorite comic book, a rare edition I'd been saving up for months to buy. I was devastated. I went to Mom and Dad, told them what happened. They just shrugged. Boys will be boys. They said, Alex didn't mean it. Didn't mean it? Of course, he meant it. He did it because he knew he could, because he knew he'd get away with it. That was Alex, always taking, never giving, always getting away with it. And now, after all this time, he's back. He's coming back into my life, and I know deep down that he's not coming back for the inheritance. He's coming back for something else. Something. Worse, the thought makes my blood run cold. I don't know what he wants, but I know it won't be good. The phone call ended, and I hung up. I'm left with my thoughts, my memories, my anger, and the gnawing feeling that this is just the beginning. Ashley's face keeps flashing in my mind. It's like a broken record, skipping on the same groove, playing the same agonizing scene over and over. The night it happened, the night everything changed. It was a party, a stupid college party. I didn't even want to go. But Ashley, she convinced me. She was always good at that, convincing me, making me feel like I belonged, like I was enough. We were together then, Ashley and I, for 3 years of late night talks, shared dreams, whispered promises. I thought she was the one. I really did. I was already planning the future, the house, the kids, the whole 9 yards, and she seemed to want it too, or at least that's what I thought. The party was loud, crowded, sweaty. I remember feeling uncomfortable, out of place. Ashley, on the other hand, was in her element. She was always the life of the party, the center of attention. I watched her from across the room, laughing, talking, her face glowing in the dim light. She looked beautiful, and then I saw him, Alex. He was there too, of course. He always was, charming his way through the crowd, effortlessly attracting everyone's attention. He saw Ashley too, and I saw the way he looked at her, the same way he looked at everything he wanted, with a kind of hunger. I felt a prickle of unease. I didn't like the way he was looking at her. I didn't trust him. I never did. I tried to push the feeling aside. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was just jealous, but the feeling wouldn't go away. It gnawed at me like a persistent itch. Later that night, I lost sight of Ashley. The party was getting more chaotic. People were spilling drinks. The music was deafening. I searched for her, weaving through the throng, calling her name, but I couldn't find her. And then I saw them, Alex and Ashley. They were in a corner, partially hidden by a curtain. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see them. I could see the way Alex was leaning in, his hand on her arm. I could see the way Ashley was looking at him, her eyes. They were different. They weren't the eyes she usually gave me. They were something else. I felt a coldness spread through me, a numbness. I didn't know what to do. I just stood there, frozen, watching them, and then Alex leaned in and kissed her. Right there, in front of everyone, or at least in front of me. Ashley didn't pull away. She kissed him back, and in that moment, something inside me broke, something shattered. I turned and walked away. I didn't say a word, I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just walked. I walked out of the party, out of the building, out of their lives. I walked until my legs ached, until my lungs burned. I walked until I couldn't walk anymore. I never spoke to Ashley again. I never spoke to Alex again. I just disappeared. I changed my number, moved to a different apartment, started a new life. I tried to forget. I tried to erase them from my memory, but it's not that easy. Some things you can't forget, some wounds never heal. And now, after all this time, Alex is back. He's coming back into my life, and I know deep down that he's not coming back for the inheritance. He's coming back for something else, something worse. The thought makes my blood run cold. I don't know what he wants, but I know it won't be good. A few days passed, days filled with a gnawing anxiety I couldn't shake off. The phone call with Mom, the mention of Alex, the inheritance, it all swirled in my head. A toxic cocktail of dread and resentment. I tried to focus on work, to lose myself in the familiar routine of the bookstore, the smell of old paper and ink, the quiet rustle of turning pages. But it was no use. Alex's shadow loomed over everything. Then, the inevitable happened. He showed up, not at the bookstore, not at my apartment, but at my mom's house. I was there, helping her sort through some of Dad's old things, boxes filled with faded photographs and forgotten trinkets, each one a painful reminder of a life that was gone. I heard a car pull up outside. My heart skipped a beat. I knew, instinctively, who it was. I looked out the window and saw him, Alex. He hadn't changed much, still the same cocky grin, the same careless swagger. He was leaning against his car, a sleek, expensive model that screamed success. Success that, I suspected, wasn't entirely his own. Mom rushed out to greet him, her face alight with a joy that made my stomach clench. They embraced, and I watched them from the window, feeling like an outsider, an intruder in my own family. Then, Alex looked up and saw me, his grin widened. Well, he said, his voice smooth as silk. Look who it is, little brother. He sauntered towards the house, his eyes fixed on me. I felt a surge of anger, a primal urge to lash out, to tell him to get lost, to disappear from my life again. But I didn't. I just stood there, frozen, watching him approach. He stopped in front of me, his smile fading slightly. Long time no see, he said, his voice softer now. How you been? The hypocrisy of it all made me want to scream. How you been? As if he cared, as if he hadn't shattered my life, stolen my happiness, left me to pick up the pieces. Fine, I said, my voice flat, emotionless. He raised an eyebrow. Really? You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I have, I muttered. He chuckled, a low, throaty sound that sent shivers down my spine. Come on, little brother, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Let's not dwell on the past. We've got a future to think about now. A future with him? The thought was unbearable, but I knew I couldn't avoid him. Not anymore. He was back, and this time he wasn't going anywhere. The next few weeks were a blur of strained family gatherings and tense conversations. Alex, true to form, had charmed Mom completely. He was attentive, helpful. The prodigal son returned. He spun tales of his supposed successes, his business ventures, his travels. Mom lapped it all up, her eyes shining with pride. It was sickening. I, on the other hand, remained wary. I watched him, studied him, trying to decipher his motives. Why was he really here? What was he planning? The inheritance was substantial, no doubt, but it wasn't enough to explain his sudden reappearance. There had to be something else. One evening, after another excruciating dinner with Alex playing the doting son, I finally confronted him. Mom had gone to bed. Leaving us alone in the living room, Alex was sprawled on the sofa, a glass of whiskey in his hand, looking perfectly at ease. What do you want, Alex? I asked, my voice tight with suppressed anger. He looked up, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. What makes you think I want anything? Don't play games with me. I snapped. You're not here for Mom. You're not here for the memories. You're here for something." He swirled the whiskey in his glass, watching the amber liquid catch the light. "You're right," he said finally. "I am here for something." He paused, letting the tension build. I waited, my heart pounding. "I'm here for you," he said, his voice low and menacing. I stared at him, confused. "Me? What do you mean?" He smiled, a slow, cruel smile that sent chills down my spine. "You took something from me, little brother," he said, "and now it's time to pay." My mind raced. What was he talking about? What could I possibly have taken from him? "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, I think you do," he said, his eyes gleaming with malice. "You took Ashley from me." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Ashley, of course, he was still obsessed with her, even after all these years. "Ashley left you," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "She chose me. She chose you because you tricked her," he snarled. "You poisoned her against me." "That's a lie," I shouted. He laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You're a liar, little brother. Always have been." He stood up, towering over me. "But it doesn't matter anymore," he said, "because now I'm going to take something from you. Something you value even more than Ashley." He leaned in close, his breath hot on my face. "I'm going to take everything," he whispered. His words hung in the air, heavy with menace. I felt a cold dread seep into my bones. What was he planning? What could he possibly take from me that I valued more than Ashley? The inheritance? My job? My sanity? The following days were filled with a suffocating sense of paranoia. I felt like I was being watched, followed, hunted. Alex was always there, lurking on the periphery of my life, a constant reminder of his threat. He'd show up at the bookstore, browsing the shelves with a predatory gaze. He'd appear at Mom's house, playing the dutiful son while I squirmed under his scrutiny. He even started showing up at my apartment building, his expensive car parked across the street, a silent sentinel. I tried to talk to Mom about it, to tell her about Alex's threats, his strange behavior, but she wouldn't listen. She dismissed my concerns, attributing them to my grudge against Alex, my inability to let go of the past. She accused me of being jealous, of trying to sabotage Alex's attempts to reconnect with the family. I felt isolated, alone. The only person I could confide in was my best friend, Chris. He listened patiently, offering words of support and encouragement. He urged me to go to the police, to file a restraining order against Alex, but I hesitated. What could I tell them? That my brother was threatening me? With what? He hadn't actually done anything. He was just there, a menacing presence, a constant shadow. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. The pressure was unbearable. I needed to escape, to get away from Alex, from the suffocating atmosphere of my own home. I called Chris, told him I needed to get out of town for a while. He didn't hesitate. He picked me up, and we drove. We drove for hours, leaving the city lights behind, heading towards the coast. We rented a small cabin by the beach, a secluded hideaway where I hoped to find some peace, some respite from the torment. For a few days, it worked. The sound of the waves, the salty air, the endless expanse of the ocean. It all had a calming effect. I started to relax, to let go of the fear that had been consuming me. But it didn't last. One morning, I woke up to a chilling sight. Alex's car was parked outside the cabin. My blood ran cold. He'd found me. How? I had no idea. But there it was, his car, gleaming in the morning sun, a mocking symbol of his relentless pursuit. I felt a surge of panic, a desperate urge to flee, to disappear again. But where could I go? He would always find me. I looked at Chris, his face etched with concern. "What are we going to do?" I asked, my voice trembling. He put a reassuring hand on my shoulder. "Don't worry," he said. "We'll figure something out." But even as he said the words, I could see the doubt in his eyes. We were trapped. We cautiously stepped out of the cabin, scanning the surroundings. The beach was deserted. The only sound, the rhythmic crashing of the waves. But I could feel his presence, a lurking shadow, watching us. Suddenly, Alex emerged from behind the cabin, his face contorted with rage. "You thought you could run away from me?" He snarled. "You thought you could hide?" He lunged at me, his hands outstretched, his eyes blazing with fury. I instinctively recoiled, but it was too late. He grabbed me by the throat, his grip like iron. I gasped for air, my vision blurring. "This is for Ashley," he hissed, his voice thick with venom. "This is for everything you took from me." He squeezed tighter, and I felt the world fading away. Just when I thought I was going to lose consciousness, I heard a shout. Chris, he was charging towards Alex, his face a mask of determination. He tackled Alex, knocking him off balance. I stumbled back, gasping for air, my throat burning. Alex scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild with fury. He lunged at Chris, but Chris was ready for him. He dodged Alex's attack and landed a punch, a solid blow to Alex's jaw. Alex staggered back, stunned. Chris pressed his advantage, raining blows on Alex, driving him back towards the edge of the cliff. Alex tried to fight back, but he was no match for Chris's fury. He stumbled, his foot catching on a loose rock. He teetered on the edge, his arms flailing wildly. And then he was gone. He disappeared over the edge, his scream echoing in the air as he plummeted towards the rocks below. I stared in horror, my mind reeling. Alex was dead. Chris had killed him. We stood there for a long moment, the silence broken only by the crashing waves. Then, Chris turned to me, his face pale and drawn. "It's over," he said, his voice hoarse. "It's finally over." But I knew it wasn't. This was just the beginning. The aftermath was a whirlwind of police investigations, legal proceedings, and emotional turmoil. Chris and I were questioned extensively, our every word scrutinized, our every action analyzed. We told the police that Alex had attacked me, that Chris had acted in self-defense. They were skeptical, but there was no evidence to contradict our story. The case was eventually closed, ruled as an accidental death. But the ordeal left its mark. Chris was haunted by what he had done. The image of Alex falling to his death forever etched in his memory. He became withdrawn, distant, a shadow of his former self. I tried to support him, to reassure him that he had done what he had to do, that it was Alex's fault, not his, but my words felt hollow, even to me. The inheritance was finally settled. Mom, devastated by Alex's death, signed everything over to me. I tried to refuse, to tell her that I didn't want it, that it was blood money, but she insisted. She said it was what Dad would have wanted. I moved back into my old apartment, the one I had shared with Ashley. It felt empty, haunted by memories of a happier time. I tried to pick up the pieces of my life, to rebuild, to move on, but it was hard. The shadow of Alex's death hung over everything. One day, I was going through some of Alex's old things, boxes that Mom had brought over from his apartment. I found a journal, a worn leather-bound book filled with his handwritten entries. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started to read. The entries were a revelation. They painted a picture of a man tormented by guilt and regret. Alex had been deeply in love with Ashley, but he had been too afraid to commit, too afraid to let go of his carefree lifestyle. He had pushed her away, and she had found solace in my arms. He had never forgiven me for that. But there was more. Alex had been involved in some shady business dealings, some risky investments that had gone sour. He had been in debt, deeply in debt. He had come back to claim the inheritance, not just to spite me, but to save himself. And then there was the final entry. It was dated the day before his death. In it, Alex confessed that he had planned to frame me for his murder. He had been going to stage an accident, make it look like I had pushed him off the cliff. He had even written a suicide note blaming me for his death. I closed the journal, my hands shaking. Alex had been a monster. He had been willing to destroy me, to ruin my life, just to get what he wanted. And I had been so blind. I had been so consumed by my own pain, my own anger, that I hadn't seen the real danger. I felt a surge of rage, a burning desire for revenge. But then, I remembered Chris. He had saved me from Alex. He had paid the ultimate price. I couldn't let Alex's evil taint Chris's sacrifice. I took the journal and the suicide note to the police. They were skeptical at first, but the evidence was undeniable. Alex's death was reclassified as a suicide. Chris was cleared of all charges. The truth had come out, but it hadn't brought me any peace. The scars of the past were too deep. The memories of Ashley, of Alex, of Chris, they would always be with me. But I had learned a valuable lesson. I had learned that forgiveness is not about forgetting. It's about letting go of the anger, the pain, the bitterness. It's about finding a way to move on, to live with the past, to embrace the future. And that's what I was going to do. Moving on wasn't a linear process. There were days when the grief and the what-ifs were overwhelming, days when I'd wake up in a cold sweat, the echo of Alex's scream still ringing in my ears, days when I'd see Ashley's face in a crowd and my heart would ache with a dull, persistent pain. But I kept going. I focused on the bookstore, throwing myself into my work, finding solace in the quiet world of books and stories. I reconnected with old friends, people I had neglected during the years of turmoil. Slowly, painstakingly, I started to rebuild my life. The inheritance, which at first felt like a burden, eventually became a means to an end. I used some of it to help Chris, to get him the therapy he needed to cope with the trauma. He was still withdrawn, but he was slowly starting to heal. We spent time together, talking, reminiscing, trying to reclaim the friendship that had been so violently disrupted. I also used some of the money to travel. I needed to get away, to escape the memories that clung to me like shadows. I went to places I had always dreamed of visiting, places that had nothing to do with Alex, with Ashley, with the past. I met new people, experienced different cultures, and slowly, I started to feel like myself again. One day, I received a letter. It was from Ashley's mother. I hadn't spoken to her since everything. I hesitated to open it, afraid of what it might contain, but finally I did. The letter was short and simple. Ashley's mother wrote that she had been thinking about me, about everything that had happened. She said that she didn't blame me for Ashley's death. She said that she knew Ashley had loved me, that she had been happy with me. She said that she hoped I was happy too. Tears streamed down my face as I read the letter. It was a small gesture, a simple expression of kindness, but it meant the world to me. It was a validation, a confirmation that I wasn't the villain in this story, that I wasn't responsible for everything that had gone wrong. I wrote back to Ashley's mother, thanking her for her letter, telling her how much it meant to me. We started a correspondence, a slow and tentative rebuilding of a relationship that had been broken by tragedy. Years passed. The sharp edges of grief began to soften, replaced by a dull ache, a bittersweet nostalgia. I never forgot Ashley or Alex or Chris. They were all a part of my story, a part of who I was, but I learned to live with the memories, to carry them with me without letting them weigh me down. I found love again, a quiet, gentle love that felt right, that felt safe. I built a life for myself, a life filled with happiness and peace. I had survived. I had overcome the darkness, and in the end, that was all that mattered. The past was behind me. The future was ahead, and I was finally ready to embrace it. Embracing the future wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about integrating it, weaving it into the tapestry of my life. The scars were still there, faint lines that reminded me of what I had endured, but they no longer defined me. They were a testament to my resilience, my ability to heal, to love, to forgive. I continued to run the bookstore, expanding its collection, turning it into a haven for book lovers in our small town. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could escape into other worlds, other lives, while still being grounded in my own. Chris, after years of therapy and self-reflection, found a new passion in photography. He traveled the world, capturing its beauty, its fragility, its stories. We stayed in touch, our bond strengthened by shared trauma and mutual support. My relationship with Ashley's mother blossomed into a genuine friendship. We exchanged letters, then phone calls, then occasional visits. She became a surrogate mother figure, a source of comfort and understanding. She told me stories about Ashley, about her childhood, her dreams, the things I never knew. It was like getting to know Ashley all over again, through the eyes of someone who loved her unconditionally. And then there was Anna. She walked into the bookstore one rainy afternoon, seeking shelter from the storm. She was a writer, quiet and introspective, with a passion for words that mirrored my own. We talked for hours that day, about books, about life, about everything and nothing. There was an instant connection, a spark that ignited a slow-burning flame. Our relationship developed gradually, built on shared interests, mutual respect, and a deep, unspoken understanding. Anna knew about my past, about Ashley, about Alex. She didn't judge me. She didn't try to fix me. She simply accepted me, flaws and all. We married a few years later, a small, intimate ceremony surrounded by close friends and family. Ashley's mother was there, Her presence a silent blessing. Chris was my best man. His smile genuine, his eyes filled with warmth. Life wasn't perfect. There were still moments of sadness, moments of doubt, but they were fleeting, overshadowed by the joy and contentment that filled my days. I had found peace, not in forgetting the past, but in learning to live with it, to honor it, to let it shape me into the person I was meant to be. The final chapter of my story wasn't about tragedy or loss. It was about resilience, about hope, about the enduring power of love. It was about finding light in the darkness, about building a future filled with happiness. Not in spite of the past, but because of it. And as I looked at Anna, her hand intertwined with mine, I knew that I had finally come home.